History has a quiet, ironic secret. Some empires didn't conquer the world with armies or laws. They conquered it long after they had collapsed. Their borders dissolved, their currencies weakened, and their political authority fractured. Something unexpected survived. It wasn't armies, it wasn't emperors, it wasn't flags, it was symbols, names, reputation. And in the ashes of these fallen empires, the world's first true global brands were born. This is the story of how collapse created continuity, how power shifted from political control to commercial trust, and how humanity learned to recognize value not by flags, but by marks. At the height of an empire, branding seems pointless. Rome didn't need a logo. The Han Dynasty didn't need a trademark. Authority was enforced by legions, taxes, and law. If Rome minted a coin, its value was unquestioned. If an emperor decreed a price, the markets obeyed. Trust was centralized, and power was absolute. But this kind of certainty is fragile, because empires are never permanent. And when they weaken, the guarantees they provide simply vanish. As empires began to fracture, the ancient world faced a brand new reality. Borders blurred, central authority faded, and law lost its reach. But trade didn't stop. In fact, it expanded. Merchants started traveling farther than any army ever could, and goods crossed borders that rulers no longer controlled. Trust, once enforced by imperial power, had to be rebuilt by other means. The question facing the world was simple, but revolutionary. If an empire no longer guarantees value, what does? The Roman Empire gives us the clearest answer. At its peak, Rome unified trade across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But by the 3rd and 4th centuries, its political authority was weakening much faster than its commercial networks. Cities fell, borders dissolved, and power fragmented. Yet Roman goods kept circulating. Wine from Gaul, glass from Syria, olive oil from Hispania. These goods traveled inside stamped amphorae, clay containers marked with seals. These stamps weren't just decoration. They identified the producer, the region of origin, and the expected quality. In a world without imperial enforcement, reputation became the new currency. The Roman state faded, but Roman commercial identities endured. Brands were born not from marketing, but from pure necessity. This pattern wasn't unique to Rome. In China, dynastic collapses didn't end long-distance trade. They actually intensified private enterprise. For centuries, silk production was tightly controlled by the state. But as central authority weakened, production decentralized. Merchants, guilds, and family networks took over. Suddenly, quality, consistency, and origin mattered more than ever. Over time, entire regions became brands in their own right. Suzhou silk, Hangzhou brocade. Foreign buyers didn't trust emperors they had never seen. They trusted names that delivered reliability. Silk Road didn't just transport goods, it transported reputation. Perhaps the most profound transformation happened in the Islamic world. As the Abbasid Caliphate weakened politically, its commercial systems expanded globally. Islamic merchants connected Spain, East Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, operating far beyond the reach of any single empire. What unified them wasn't military power, it was commercial identity. Merchant houses developed names that were recognized across continents. Trust was reinforced through contracts, ledgers, and an ethical reputation. A merchant's name became his bond. Failure meant being totally excluded from the trade networks. This was branding at its purest, not advertising, but survival. Later, in medieval Europe, the collapse of Roman authority gave rise to city-states like Venice, Genoa, and Florence, politically fragile but commercially dominant. These cities couldn't compete with empires militarily, so they competed economically. They standardized production and fiercely protected their merchants' reputations. The Venetian glassmakers of Murano are a perfect example. Their techniques were so valuable that artisans were forbidden from leaving the island. But more importantly, the name Murano became synonymous with excellence. Centuries later, it still is. A deeper mechanism was taking shape. Empires create scale, but brands create continuity. When political systems fail, people don't stop trading. They just search for new anchors of trust. Brands became decentralized institutions, replacing flags with symbols and authority with reliability. The early modern era only accelerated this. The Dutch and British East India Companies were not just corporations, they were brand empires. Their names carried authority across oceans, their insignias reduced risk, and their reputations enabled credit. Today's global brands operate on this same ancient logic. Apple, Coca-Cola, they are recognized everywhere, governed nowhere fully. They don't rely on imperial authority, they rely on consistency. A logo on a device, the same taste in any country, a promise that value will exist tomorrow. History teaches us that empires collapse loudly, but brands survive quietly. Political power is brittle, but commercial trust is resilient. When the world becomes unstable, people search for something they can trust. And that might be the final lesson. The future doesn't belong to the most powerful, it belongs to the most trusted. Thanks for watching.